Then it's taken to the printer. The text is then being reported. It's finished being translated. By May of 1828, we've been looking at these dates for the Book of Mormon since 1820, if you just tuned in. And that's when the text is basically done. The book actually is kind of reborn at that time, spiritually reborn. Death, his birth is when the plates come out of the ground. Death would be when they are reburied. We're not given the date exactly, but 28th of August, the 13 days after that period, would fit in very well with what we do know about the date that the plates go back to the angel. And this is going to suggest, we were not told what the angel did with them. This is going to suggest that they're reburied somewhere, because that's the day of the death of the plates. And then the deer is the symbol after death. It's when the spirit continues on and goes somewhere. So the spirit, what would the spirit of the plates be? These are the plates that were born and died. Well, the spirit of what's in the Book of Mormon is, in fact, in the Book of Mormon that's translated and published as a paper book. And that date comes out exactly, 13 deer comes out exactly on the 6th of April, 1830, when the church starts. That would be the 7th day in this cycle of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. And I thought that was interesting enough to, we've spent almost 20 minutes on that one slide. I knew it would take a while, but hopefully people are going to find that interesting, that here's an ancient American book coming forth on an ancient American calendar, right when the plates are coming out. The angel said, we can't take them out yet. It's going to be, basically 4 years. And you can see the 4 years right on this. It's 4 years. And, okay, let's move on. But that, and again, maybe hold questions for a few minutes. Let's go to slide 48. I realized that was confusing. I had trouble understanding it, and I was saying it. So these are tricky things. But nobody has known that. This is new material. Now we're going to talk about leap days in general. The Julian calendar approximates the seasonal year right now in our day is 365.2422 days. That is not a good average over 7,000 years, but it's what it is today. It approximates that by rounding it off to 365 and a quarter. And so the time from Julius Caesar until the 1500s, you added one leap day every 4 years, and that averaged to 365 and a quarter days. February used to be the last month of the year long ago, and so it ended up the shortest, and so that's when the extra day is put in. And so let's go to slide 49. The Gregorian calendar, that's the one we use today, and that goes back to Pope Gregory the 13th, 1582, and it does a better averaging. It skips 3 leap years every 4 centuries. This is a detail most of you can live without very well, because we just had this happen in 2000. It'll be good for another 100 years, but every 100 years, 3 out of 4 centuries, 1700, 18, and 1900, those years were not leap years, even though they're divisible by 4. That makes a really good average, the 2425, and that's good enough to use all through history. So in my work, the Gregorian calendar is used back to the time of Adam, and it's accurate that far. So Pope Gregory had his mathematicians do an excellent job to get that. I don't even know how they did it so well. I'm hesitant to say they're inspired or anything, but they got it. They got it right. Because I did a lot of work to figure out the average for all time. That you can't find that. I couldn't find that anywhere. I've never seen anybody calculate it, because most people don't know when to start. They don't know the time started in 4000 BC. So who's going to calculate that? I did. Okay, slide number 50. Some calendars track celestial objects, and they use an entire leap week. And some others use the Trecina to get the long-term average. So we've talked about the Enoch calendar already. And we have not talked about, I don't believe, any of the others. But the Enoch calendar only has 364 days. And I've mentioned this, that when it corrects to try to be closer to 365 and a quarter, it adds in 7 a whole week at a time, because it's based on the week. It always starts on a Sunday every year. So it does not have a leap day, it has a leap week. The way it works is when you take the average over a long time, it's 365.24237 is the long-term average. That's very close to the 2425, and it's close enough that the Lord seems to be using that all time. I show what the other averages are. On these, I don't show what the true average should be. That would have been nice, but I guess I like the slide to not be overcrowded. But the basic idea of this is you say, hey, come on, a calendar with 364 days, that's not very accurate. And it turns out that when you put in the leap years by a week at a time, it's basically just as accurate as our Gregorian, and it's highly accurate. So that's all on that slide. Let's go to, we've got just another minute or so before we get our halfway point. Each calendar which tracks it, so we're on 51. Each calendar which tracks the celestial object has a uniform version which never has leap days and doesn't actually track things. This will take the rest of our time for tonight. This is a tricky concept. So there is a uniform Enoch calendar, uniform Jubilee, uniform star, of all of the ones that are tracking something in the sky. Each one of those has a uniform version. So we're really going to study about 8 calendars, but it's really 16 because almost every one is tracking something. So here's the idea. Well, let me read the bottom now. This has 2 labels. The second label says, uniform calendars are useful to celebrate holy days, which are usually seasonal, like Easter is supposed to be in the spring, or similar events at other times of the year. So, for instance, if you have an Easter meaning the resurrection of Christ, if you have a resurrection type of event, like maybe the Book of Mormon is being resurrected, it was dead and now coming to life again. And there's other resurrection types of events. The Holy Tabernacle of Moses is raised up, a resurrection type event. If that resurrection happens in the spring and it works out to do that on Easter, then great. Then you can do it on the real Easter. But if it's happening at a different time of year, maybe in the middle of winter, this uniform calendar gives you an opportunity to have at least one other option, that at some other time of year, because see, this is never corrected, so it's going to go through the seasons. It always has 364 days, the Enoch calendar, uniform Enoch. So it's going to get out of sync really fast with the seasons, losing, it's a day and a quarter short every year. I mean, in 60 years, it's 60 plus a quarter, 75 days off in 60 years. I mean, that's a whole season. So this allows somebody to do a Passover type event in the middle of winter, or an Easter or whatever, and they all have it. And the Lord is using all of these. This took a long time to discover and to verify that this is something from God and what He's using. But you do it statistically. You show that all these events are happening on these calendars, and it's way beyond chance. And so a lot of what I do, it's basically statistical arguments. So with that slide, I think that's a good place to stop on the official going through these in order. So you got the concept now that entire weeks of either or Tricinas are put into these calendars, and there's a version that never puts them in, and it's all useful. So I will now, for the last 20 minutes, open this for questions, and if there are no questions, I think I have something else to do, but let's now open it for questions from however they notify Jared that they have questions.
Thank you, John. So if you do have questions, you can either unmute yourself and go ahead and ask those questions, or you can drop questions into the group chat. I have one question to start, and this is, you may have touched on this from time to time, but I'm curious. You've made comments several times, John, about discovering different calendars and understanding them differently. Can you share a little bit about, I guess, how they're discovered? Is it just research that you're doing and you're finding out that things were measured in a different way, or is there something else?
I can certainly comment on how this is discovered, and I'll even tell you my secret word, discover, which means to uncover. In my papers, and I try to in my speech, I use it reflexively. Instead of saying, I discovered this or I discovered that, I will say, on this date, this was discovered in my research. I use it was discovered instead of I did it. I do that because to me, it's like the word revealed. I don't want to go around saying things are being revealed to me. That sounds way too pious and like I think I'm somebody special or whatever. But they are uncovered. It's like uncovered or revealed. And they're not revealed before their time. Sometimes I will have prayed to know something for a long time, and the answers I would get is the fruit will come ripe when it's ripe. Well, the exact words it was better than that. It was, the ripening of fruit is not hastened by concern. And there was a time for all of this knowledge to come forth, and in a lot of cases, I had to wait decades to get it after I prayed for it. But here's how the different calendars came. In the book of Enoch, it describes the Enoch calendar in detail. He tells you how to do it. That one was straightforward. The Jubilee calendar was discovered in the Dead Sea. And now I'm looking at our last slide we did, 51. The Jubilee calendar is described in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it shocked scholars when they saw it because they were having a big thing. In the Hebrew calendar, they have first fruits 49 days after what we would call Easter, and they call the waving of the Omer. On this temple scroll, they found this calendar, and every 49 days, they had a first fruits of oil, a first fruits of the wheat, and the barley, and the first fruits of the grapes. And there was a calendar, and it was somewhat described. The Venus calendar, I'd heard all these legends that the American Indians had a Venus calendar, and they wouldn't even fight wars on certain days because of Venus. And of course, the Americans would set up their wars to fight on the days when the Venus wouldn't let the Indians fight back. Use that to their advantage to destroy people. And so that was described. And the Aztecs actually told what the Venus cycle meant. We'll be going through that soon. But it represented the birth of Christ that they call Quetzalcoatl, and his life and his death and his resurrection. And it's all on that calendar, and that's why it's so nifty. The Mercury calendar was one of the hardest because Mercury is a morning and evening star like Venus. And I spent years trying to decide if they were two parts of the same calendar, like a minute hand and an hour hand, because Mercury is associated with Venus everywhere. Or is there a separate Mercury calendar and a separate Venus And now I'll tell you how the things are discovered. Once you have to, it's like putting pegs in the ground. When a surveyor is finding out where things are, they start with some anchor points. Orson Pratt sets up an anchor point in Salt Lake, and everything was measured from that. When the Mormons went to San Diego, some of the San Diego streets are set up, measured from Salt Lake City, where the anchor point was put in. I needed some anchor points, like the resurrection of Christ, which is clearly stated in the Bible if you just believe what it says. They give you the exact date and year and day, everything, time of day. One of my first anchor points was that. Another was the birth of Christ. And when you start getting these anchor points, then you find, and especially on important dates, like the resurrection of Christ seems to be the most important in history so far. And it's holy on all the calendars except one, as far as I can tell. And you can start to find out, oh, this is a holy day, and you'll have a choice that Easter could either be out of 5 days, 4 blah days, or one really holy day. And so you can start to line them up and say, aha, if I line this up, then all of these other dates line up. And so from this point on, it's statistical. If you have to know probability theory, and it turns out I know that. And you have to know the rules of probability and statistics, not just the calculations, but the theory behind it. Like if you use a point to make a theory, you cannot use the same point to prove the theory, because of course, if it's the theory, you used it to make the theory. People, as obvious as that is, people forget that all the time. So you look at the events you have. I had a growing list of events, and at first there were only a few, like the baptism, birth of Christ. I had maybe 5 or so. I now have 200 solid anchor dates and 400 overall dates. So I still have to do some new calendar. I don't have to, but I'm hoping to do a Jupiter and a Saturn calendar, which will both be very important. Now that I have all these anchor dates, I have a lot more dates where I can just see what fits. And I know you learn the patterns. The Lord said, I'll give you a pattern in all things. Well, the patterns, I can share this, because I'll share this, because this is the big pattern. And then I'll try to leave room for some other questions. But when I first started realizing this is here, open ground to be discovered, and it's amazing stuff, I started to work on it, and I started to pray. And I was praying to understand the calendar and how does it work. And as I prayed, I got these answers, and they were all about life. The part I just said about when a plant is born, that was an answer to prayer, that things before they're born, they're in the wet and in the dark and in the earth kind of a thing. And when they're born, they come out into the air and into the light and into the wind, and they breathe. And that's for plants, it's for people, it's for animals, it's for the earth. The earth is born when the land comes up out of the water. That's the birth of the earth. So I started getting all of this stuff about, plants coming out of the earth. And I remember praying and saying, wait a minute, whoa, am I reading somebody else's mail? I was praying about a calendar, and I wanted to understand that. And I'm getting all this stuff on biology, and I don't know much about biology. I'm an astronomer. So, I'm trying to help the Lord, just in case wires were crossed. I'm always trying to straighten him out. It's sort of funny. I also try to make him laugh a lot. But anyway. And I got a clue. I don't usually get answers where I hear a voice. I get answers where I just see a flash of a picture, and it's enough for me to get a clue on how to have the next thing discovered. But this time I heard a voice, and the voice said, "This is my work and my glory, to bring to pass life. And if you want to understand my calendar, you have to understand life. And I said, oh, and that had never occurred to me. I said, oh, okay, no mistake. All right, I'll take notes here. Life, birth is when this happens. And I learned the steps of life. And guess what? The steps of life are the steps on the sacred round, just like the Indians said they were. But now I'm getting it straight from what I believe is the Lord instead of tradition from the Aztecs and the Mayans. The Mayans really said it the best to the priests. Those were my two sources before. But they had a lot of gaps in what they said. So part of this, I do have to say, I would claim it is revelation. I don't like that word. I avoid that, just kind of like Denver does. He doesn't want to use that, and he'll use scriptures instead, and I try to do the same thing. I've written over 80 papers on calendars, and nowhere in there do I say anything like I just told you. I don't say anything about my meaning of the word discover or something's revealed to me. If what I discover doesn't stand by itself, then it's of no use. Who cares if I had a dream or claimed this or that? Nobody's going to want to believe that. So all of my papers, I just say, look at this. Look at a plant. When would you say it's born? If it's not at that time, have you ever thought about when it's born? Or when the earth was born? And you just point it out and say, this looks like a good thing. In other words, if in a dream, if somebody comes and shows me something in my paper, I just say, look at this. I'll say the same words that the guide in the dream said. That look at this. Isn't it interesting that the snake is opposite the eagle? Or the Aaronic priesthood sign is opposite the child who has sinned and needs repentance. And you can look at the Aztec calendar to see that. So that's about all you probably need. I need to work almost all of it out myself. The only time I have these little flashes of light is when I'm really stuck and I pray for help. And then either I get no help or I get a flash that shows me. And if I get no help, I know it means that I can do it myself. I don't need help. I just keep working on it and I'll get it. I've learned not to interpret that as I've been abandoned or something like that. It's that I've got to do everything I can myself. And you already know that's how things work. So does that answer your question well enough?
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Okay. There's only 5 minutes left now. Other questions?
Yes, John. What's your preliminary thoughts on what the Jupiter and the Saturn calendars might?
Oh, Jupiter's going to be Abraham. You do Venus, and it's just Isaac right on Venus, Jacob right on Venus. Their wives, Rebecca and Rachel, burned on the day one birth. So all of those people except Isaac. Isaac's born on the day for sacrifice. When they sacrifice the lamb, when they choose the lamb for sacrifice, he's the sacrifice guy. The others are born on the day one birth, on the Venus calendar. Okay? You go to Abraham and Sarah, nothing on the Venus calendar. You read the scriptures and the old books, and they all say that Jupiter is the higher priesthood. Mars is like the Aaronic priesthood. Everything that's John the Baptist is all Mars. But they say the higher priesthood and Abraham, they just say Abraham's planet is Jupiter. The word for Jupiter in the Hebrew is Zedek, and Mel, which means right or righteousness. Melchiz is king. Melchizedek is the king of righteousness. But see, the planet Jupiter goes with Melchizedek. So the higher priesthood, I'm expecting, it turned out Abraham, now this is a good example of the uniform calendar. So Sarah and Abraham are not born on anything on the regular Venus calendar. But when I finally discovered or when it was discovered to me of the uniform Venus calendar, it turned out that Abraham and Sarah are both of them are born on one birth on the uniform calendar. And that's way beyond gender. But see, that's for them, and that's a second different. I believe when I do the regular, they're going to come out on one birth, something big on the Jupiter calendar. I mean, when I do the Jupiter. Saturn is going to be something bigger, and it's more like a big timekeeper. Saturn ties to the moon. The moon goes around in 29.5 days. It's Venus cycle. And Jupiter and Saturn goes around in 29.5 years instead of 29.5 days. Those two, and they're both very visible, bright, visible planets. They're both going to have good things, and other stuff has been coming. It comes when it's time. I can't just go out and say, okay, now I'll do the Jupiter calendar, because it doesn't work that way. I will wait, and when the inspiration comes and says, now it's time to do that, then it's time. And I'll tell you something else. Once, after I received that knowledge that don't pick the fruit before it's ready, I asked. You learn to ask questions. And so I asked, how do I know when it's right? And the answer was a ripe fruit drops into your hand when you just pluck it. And I didn't even know what the word pluck is, but pluck is like to pluck a string on a guitar. You just touch it. You know that ripe overripe will fall to the ground without even being picked, right? So a ripe fruit, you just touch it and it drops into your hand. And I thought, what a great answer.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And isn't that, and that's how it's been when it's right. In fact, this recent stuff has come so fast that I will get something, and I'm not only supposed to write a paper on it in a few days, I'll post it on my Instagram, on the thing we're looking at now. Some of the recent ones have been posted on the day they were discovered. I didn't know what I was going to do that night, and I'd pray and say, what should I do tonight? And then, boom, there comes a new, that night Instagram comes to me, and I don't tell people that this is hot off the press. That it's supposed to be a teacher sharing his knowledge of many decades, and you don't want a teacher. You don't want a teacher to teach up to the edge of his knowledge, but I'm doing that now because it comes, it drops into my hand, it's right, and it's time. So that's what's happening. We are living in a time. I've spent 30 years, more than 30. First article, 1985, that's 33 years ago. And I started in it about 1980. So it's like 38 years I've been working on this stuff. And now all of a sudden, it's coming so fast. I had 3 papers last month, and I might have 4 this month. I was as fast as I can write them. Anyway, so the time is now. Things are coming. I'm glad a few people are interested in this class. And let me see what time it is. I bet you it's 8:45, so it's time to wind it up. But anyway, thanks. I'm glad you asked those questions, because I can see where people would ask. But this seems to be sort of my life's work. This is, somebody's supposed to be doing these things, and not many people. Well, I apparently am it looks like I'm the one doing it. So there you go.
I'll just make one note that when the Book of Mormon, when we accepted by covenant in September of last year, that was during the grass Trecena. So I just wonder if that is kind of a prelude to the resurrection, or the sealed portion.
No, the grass is actually separate from. I used to think it was. I in my early papers, I said that the grass was like a prelude. I couldn't figure out why there were 2 days for resurrection, because grass is a picture of grass growing out of a skull. And if that's not a perfect picture for resurrection, that new life coming up from death, it just looks like a resurrection picture. The reed, which is the symbol for resurrection, is an arrow, which is sort of like what the grass grows into when it's fully done. So I thought, well, it's probably like a 2-part thing for resurrection. But the more that I've compared it to other calendars and how it works, the day grass is tied more to consecration and being chosen. It is a day for being set apart and chosen. So if that was in the grass Trisina, that is, I didn't even know that. That would be a match for a covenant people being chosen. And
wow.
I really only learned that about 2 weeks ago. So
Wow.
there you go. But anyway, so you are getting hot material off the press. I'm still trying to really double check it and make sure it's right, because I don't like going back and correcting and changing and oh, I was wrong. I've made very few corrections because I've tried to be extremely careful. All righty, we are overtime. Let's wind it up. So thanks everybody that is listening, and I'm glad to have a chance to share this with people who actually care about it.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And we'll go ahead and conclude. If there is some lingering questions, drop them in the chat, and we'll forward those on to John. Maybe can be addressed next time. But thanks, everyone, for today for joining, and we'll conclude. Thanks, John.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.